Hello, and welcome back to the Animal Room at the Science Center in Ithaca, New York. My name is Colin. I'm the curator of live exhibits. I'm excited to take you on another tour in the Animal Room. Right now we're looking at our lionfish exhibit. I just turned on the room lights so that I can show you some things a little better, but it means we have a little more glare on the tank. Today, I'm going to take you through our 4 big aquariums we have in the animal room here and show you some of the inner workings of the tanks, how they would keep everything running smoothly and keeping the systems strong and healthy for the animals to keep going. So these are our lionfish. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go grab some food and we'll feed them. It's always fun to watch them gobble up something really quickly. These guys are active predators. Oh boy, they see the food. You can see how excited they get when the food shows up. These guys are active predators. There we go. One down. That fast. They roam around reefs and other structures in the ocean where they can find prey that they can corner, and they flare out their big pectoral fins to keep the animals stuck in their place, and then with one swift gulp like you just saw, they gobble them right up. I'm going to move you all over to the cichlid tank, and we'll start there. Get things moved out of the way here. Here's our cichlid exhibit. Again, I apologize for the glare. Give you some close-up views of a few of our fish here. Again, if this light's not too much. This guy here, this one is called a Venustus, a giraffe hap, Haplochromis. It's the group of fish that it's part of. There's another giraffe hap. You can probably tell why they get the name, the common name giraffe hap. There's neat spots on their sides. And there's a couple of our lemon drops. Their common name is pretty easy to tell too. Oh, and there's one of our staff favorites back there. That's a little one we call Frank. Frank is a fish that you can see he's got a little fungal infection, so we'll actually be catching him up in the next day or two and moving him to the back room where we'll be able to give him a treatment, be able to clear that fungus up. But Frank is a fish who was bred in this tank. His parents were part of the last group of cichlids we had. And he was one of the few babies that was lucky enough to make it out of the tank and actually down into the filter. It's the only place that little babies can survive in this tank and not get eaten up by the adults in the tank. And so he lived down in the filter for a long time before we were able to catch him. And we finally were able to catch him and moved him into the back room where he grew up quite a bit, and then was excited to have a new group of fish, smaller fish, that we could incorporate him into. So now he gets to live on exhibit. So I brought you down here to the filter system, which is where Frank started his life. Grab my flashlight, try to make the dark back recesses a little more visible. There we go. So in this system, We've got our drain line that comes back. That big line back there is our drain line. Brings water back from the tank, the dirty water, and then comes down into this filter system where you can see we have filter pads that filter out the particulates, catch all the big chunks. And then underneath here, these are called bio balls. And the purpose of bio balls, they're plastic balls that have lots of surface area. And that surface area allows bacteria to colonize the bio balls, and it's the bacteria that creates the biological filter that helps clean the water up. When the fish's waste comes out of them as ammonia, and then the bacteria in the biological filter are able to convert the ammonia, which is very toxic, and not very high levels can start to make fish sick and kill them. But the bacteria converts the ammonia into nitrites, which are actually still quite toxic, but then there's another bacteria that converts the nitrites into nitrates. And then the nitrates are far less toxic. And then we do regular water changes to pull the nitrates out, and are able to then keep the water clean. So then this system also has a bubble baffles here. See if I can get that to show up at all without too much glare. There we go. This system here keeps any bubbles that come out of the filter system from getting into the main holding system over here, so that we don't suck bubbles back into our tank. And then you can see down here we also keep a heater in the tank. You can see it's on right now with that little red light, and that helps keep the water temperatures just right for the fish. And this bulkhead here is where the water gets pulled back in by this pump. Gets pumped up, and then we have a UV sterilizer here. This is our UV sterilizer. A little dirty, sorry about that. If the water goes through this unit, you can see it has this eerie blue light on this end. There's a UV bulb in here. We've talked about UV, how it's important for reptiles, but UV is a strong sterilizer, and strong levels of UV, while it'll give us a sunburn, will also kill lots of organisms as well. So as the water goes through that UV sterilizer, any pathogens that could be in the water, anything that could make the fish sick, are killed before the water is then pumped back up, back into the exhibit. So that's our filtration system. Oh, there's one of our albinos. So this is a fish that you'd unlikely see in the wild. Oh, that awful glare. So that's our cichlid system. Next I'm going to move you all over. We'll go back to the lionfish, where we can take a look at that system. Freshwater systems are generally much more simple than saltwater systems. It takes a little bit more to keep saltwater systems clean and going. Alright, so we've already taken a look at the lionfish. We can take another good look at them. They are such gorgeous fish. It's unfortunate that they wreak such havoc in the Atlantic where they've been released. And that came about from people having pet lionfish that they didn't want to care for anymore, and ended up taking out to the ocean. And now they're found all throughout the Atlantic and the Caribbean, and are wreaking horrible ecological damage, gobbling up all sorts of small things off of the reefs, making them almost denuded. So while they're beautiful fish, they shouldn't be in the Atlantic. It's an important lesson that if you have a pet you don't want to care for, you should never release it into the wild. It's typically very inhumane for the pet, who generally won't be able to survive in the wild, but if they do, then they can become a horrible ecological problem. So there's a lionfish, and now let's come down here and look at the filtration system here. There's lots of salt creep in this tank, which is a buildup of salt. As salt water gets onto things and then evaporates, it leaves behind salt deposits. So this system's very similar here in that we have the same wet-dry filter. So over here we have a filter pad and bio balls where the biological filter exists. We also have a UV sterilizer in here. The different piece of equipment in this system is this protein skimmer. There you can see all that awful salt creep. So a protein skimmer is essentially, I usually describe them like a sewage treatment plant. It uses what's called foam fractionation to pull waste proteins out of the water. If you're able to see here, see if there we go. It's a chamber that is full of bubbles. There's a special pump down in here. I'm not sure I'll get a good view. There we go. That's the pump. And it has this little tube here where it's able to pull air down into the pump and mixes the air in with the water it's pumping to create all these little bubbles in here. And as the water swirls around in there with all the bubbles, proteins have what's called a hydrophobic portion of them. It means it's a part of the protein molecule that does not like water and wants to be away from water. And so when there's a bubble, the protein will be attracted to that bit of air where the hydrophobic part can be away from the water, and then the bubbles get churned up into this column and then overflow out of there. You can see a bunch of the bubbles up at the top. And I was going to clean this protein skimmer earlier today, but I decided I'd hold off so I could show you all the nasty filth that a protein skimmer can pull out of the water. So it's able to concentrate all that grossness and pull it right out of the system. So this is one great way that we're able to keep saltwater systems working well. Foam fractionation doesn't really work very well in freshwater. It's only effective in saltwater. So you generally would never see these systems in a freshwater system, only in saltwater. So that's our protein skimmer, and then regularly I have to take that top cup off and we go and dump all that filthy, nasty liquid out and clean it out. If you could smell it, you wouldn't want to smell it. It smells horrible. So that's our protein skimmer, and that's a really special piece of equipment in our saltwater systems. Now let me bring you back up. Say goodbye to our lionfish. And next we'll move on over to what is my favorite system. No, sorry there. Our reef tank. And I love reef tanks because not only are they beautiful, gorgeous systems with so many colors and life forms in them, it's like getting to grow an underwater garden, but it's really a chance to keep and culture and ecosystem. The more you can keep a vibrant ecosystem with all the different parts in it going, the better your corals do. So that's our Darwin ocellaris. That's a black clownfish. And there's our green chromis, who's just chasing around, and our yellow-eye coal tang, who's the good cleaner in here, is always helping me clean up algae. Awful glare there, sorry. Well, let's get down to this filtration system, because this is by far the most complex in order to keep this ecosystem running. So we come down here, and this system has the same basic parts that we've already looked at. Now you can see the protein skimmer here too. That one is also full of funk. Lost my flashlight. Let me grab that. So we have the same general system here. We come over here, and we've got the bio balls in there, the biological system, filtration. Then in this system we have a second chamber here where we keep a deep bed of substrate. And there are actually bacteria, they're called denitrifying bacteria, that actually are able to take nitrates from water and they convert them into nitrogen gas as part of their biological process. And so that's a way that we can get nitrates out of the system without having to do a water change. Generally, the only way you can get nitrates out is either by doing a water change or growing plants, algae or some other kind of plant that can soak up the nitrate as fertilizer. Or if you can put a deep substrate like this in, then you're able to culture denitrifying bacteria that can help form nitrates out. And we also have the protein skimmer, and this system does have a UV sterilizer, though I generally don't run the UV sterilizer on this system, as I mentioned, I'm trying to keep an entire ecosystem going, and so there's lots of things in this tank that produce tiny little babies, and those babies would get killed by going through the UV sterilizer, and I don't actually expect those babies to ever grow up, but they become food for many of the corals or even the fish in the tank. So generally we don't use the UV sterilizer. Another piece of equipment this tank has is, here's the pump that runs it, and then this column here, this is, let's see if I can show you this without having too much glare on it. This is called a GFO reactor. GFO stands for granular ferric oxide, or another name for granular ferric oxide is rust. These are actually rust particles, essentially. You can see they're churning up. There's just a slow water flow that goes through here. And an interesting thing about granular ferric oxide, or rust, is that it will absorb phosphates. The two main things that foul water in a fish tank are nitrates and phosphates. Nitrates generally build up faster than phosphates, but with a deep sand bed or a deep substrate bed, you can generally keep nitrates quite low in a reef tank, and with lots of corals, the corals will absorb nitrates as well. The phosphates can often be a problem, and they'll grow particular types of algae that can be problematic. And so by running a GFO reactor like this and slowly pumping the water through it, you can absorb the phosphates out of the water. And so this is a system where every 2 to 4 weeks, depending on how dirty the system's getting, we'll have to change out this substrate. And we have a special method to be able to strip the phosphates off of the GFO so we can reuse it. We don't have to discard it. But that's a way to help keep our phosphate levels under control. So that's another neat system. But now, in order to keep corals alive, corals need very clean water. That's one of the most important things. So you need to have super low nitrates and phosphates. Then once you've done that and the corals are growing quite well, then you need to also keep levels of calcium and alkalinity very high, because as corals grow, they develop a calcareous skeleton, a bony, hard, stone-like skeleton made out of calcium carbonate. And so in order to grow those skeletons, they need lots and lots of calcium and alkalinity in the water. And so this thing I'm showing you back here it's called a peristaltic pump. Those two little white round parts with the tubes going in and out are little peristaltic pumps. They're little pumps that can move small amounts of liquid at a time. And I have the peristaltic pump. There's two of them. So now we'll come down here and take a look. Here is the first container. This container here, we keep a solution of calcium chloride in it. And that's a solution that will add calcium to the tank. And so every 2 hours, that peristaltic pump will turn on, and it pumps, I think I have it set now to pump about 12 milliliters of this calcium chloride solution into the tank. And that helps keep the calcium levels up very high, almost at a saturated, or almost super saturated level. So we keep as much calcium in the water as we're able to. And then back behind this, there's another container back there. You can see the tube going into it. And that we keep sodium bicarbonate, also known as baking soda. We keep a sodium bicarbonate solution in that container. And likewise, every 2 hours, but in alternate hours, the peristaltic pump will pump a little bit of that sodium bicarbonate solution in, and that keeps alkalinity up really high. And so those are the two solutions that we add to the tank on a slow, regular basis to try to keep calcium alkalinity levels high. And that's what keeps the system healthy enough that we can grow all of these corals up here. There's our frog spawn. That's one of my favorite corals. It's fun to get mesmerized by. This one actually, while it has soft parts that you can see flowing there, those are the polyps. It is actually a stony coral. Let's see if I can get down here. It almost looks like a Dr. Seuss kind of tree. I'm losing you in the overhead lights there, sorry. It's a branching coral. It branches all about. And then the polyps fill out so much that you just get this huge cluster of essentially tentacles blowing all over. So that's our reef tank. Oh, let me back up, and then we've got one more system to look at. This is our seahorse tank. And the seahorse tank, there's one of our seahorses. Get a good look at her. There she is, waiting around for some little mices to come floating by that she can gobble up. So seahorse tanks are just fish tanks, so the water, the only parameters they need are just clean water, clean and cool too. So this is our tank. We keep very good water flow going in here. The main problem with these guys are the buildup of organic particulates. So little bits of uneaten food or their poop or things like this. So for this system, we have a special pump here hidden in this rock that helps keep the water flowing quite a bit. And we have a large, show you, return pump. So this has a return pump like the other systems we looked at, though this one's a little bit larger than the other systems. And that pumps water back in to this part up here. And we keep lots of water flow going so that all those little organic particulate won't settle on the bottom of the tank. It stays suspended in the water and then gets pulled into the overflow. There's the overflow, so that's where the water flows back into the filtration system. And then it comes down here, and its system is quite similar, but there's a couple differences, a couple key differences to it. In here, grab my flashlight. There we go. We have this special box built on top of the filter, which can hold filter socks, they're called. See around that salt creek. There, that's the filter sock opening. So there, the tube comes down from the tank and goes into the filter sock. And so all the water that flows through here goes through this filter sock. We use filter pads on the other systems, but filter pads are not quite as effective. It's harder to get 100% of the water to go through a filter pad. And so by using these filter socks, there are two of them in here, the other one's on the other side, over there. Every drop of water that goes through this system runs through that filter sock. And so we're able to capture a lot more of the particulate waste that comes through with those filter socks. And we have our bio balls here, and our protein skimmer. And in this system, the UV sterilizer is quite important, so I make sure that's always running. And then the last piece that this has that's a little unique is this tube here where you can see water coming out of it. This is the return from, there's a pump over here. There we go. That pump in there is submersible pump. That's pumping water up this tube out of the tank. And it actually goes right through the side of the tank here. And then this step, well, many of you think that this step exists so that you all can look out the window and see people playing golf. We actually have this step here is what's called a pipe chase. So these pipes run underneath these steps and into our back room. See, I'm getting ready to do a water change. I've got my siphon and hose out to pull some water. I'll do a water change on this tank as soon as we're done here. So water runs into the back room, and we have a chiller back there. And the chiller is basically a refrigeration unit. It makes the water cold. And after the water's run through that and gets nice and cold, it gets pumped back into here, into there. There's a type of bacteria that seahorses can be afflicted by. It's called Vibrio. And Vibrio, there's many different species of Vibrio. And Vibrio can make seahorses very sick. And at warmer temperatures, Vibrio does better and better. And so if you can keep your tank below 74 degrees, they're far less likely to get infected by Vibrio. So we run water through that chiller to keep it nice and cool. So those are all the ways that we keep our aquariums clean, to keep our animals healthy. Well, that's my tour for today. I hope you all enjoyed checking out our aquariums and seeing what it takes to make them tick. When you all are back in again, you're more than welcome to ask me questions about these filtration systems if you like. And in fact, another way to do this, read this up and see if I can grab it. Wow. If you all would like to email me, here's my email address. You can put in the subject Animal Room Tour. Send me an email, ask me any questions, or if there are things in the animal room you'd like to see, or things you'd like me to talk about. Go ahead and shoot me an email, and I will try to cover those things on some of our future tours. I'm going to bring you over here. We'll set you all up to look at our bicolored dart frogs for a little while. Unfortunately, these guys stopped calling just a moment ago. They were calling like crazy. Dart frogs are very sensitive to the barometric pressure of the environment, the high and low pressure systems. And when they feel a low pressure system coming, that often means rain and storms, and it will make dart frogs go crazy. And they'll start calling and calling and calling. So hopefully perhaps in a minute or two here they'll start calling again. Well, thanks for joining me. I'll see you all again next week. Take care and stay healthy.